The HOA president broke into my cabin at the exact moment I was meeting with the state attorney general. People think I exaggerate when I say that, but the footage shows everything: the handle turning, the door slamming open, and Marjorie's voice slicing through the quiet like she owned the place. But that moment didn't come out of nowhere. It began 6 months earlier, the morning I realized my grandfather's land was being stolen 1 inch at a time. I reached Rock Pine just after sunrise, the lake still holding that silver-blue tint that appears only when cold air hugs warm water. Gravel scratched under my truck tires as I pulled up beside the cabin. The scent of pine and wet earth greeted me, pulling me back decades. My grandfather built that place in 1957 with his own hands. Every board had a story. Every nail existed because he drove it there. I stepped out and caught a strange smell: diesel, sharp and recent. Construction equipment doesn't belong anywhere near my boundary line. Nothing had been approved. Nothing had been scheduled. The cabin sat quiet, but the land around it felt disturbed, like someone had dragged the forest sideways when I wasn't looking. I walked toward the shoreline, the soil soft from last night's rain. That's when I noticed the first problem. The old survey pin, the one buried behind the cedar stump, had vanished. Not loosened. Not damaged. Gone. The metal stake that defined the western edge of my property since Eisenhower was president had simply evaporated. Anyone familiar with land boundaries knows what that means: someone wanted it missing. I crouched, brushing away damp needles. The ground had been disturbed recently. Tracks from narrow tires cut through the mud. Maybe a small ATV. Definitely not mine. What the hell happened here? I muttered. Inside the cabin, I hoped for a normal day: air out the rooms, test the heater, check the plumbing. Instead, on the kitchen counter sat a thick envelope stamped with bright crimson ink. Silver Birch Reserve, Notice of Noncompliance. I felt something tighten in my chest. The HOA rarely contacted me, and when they did, it was usually nonsense: paint shade issues or complaints about my non-uniform firewood stack. But this envelope was heavy. Inside were printed photos of my cabin, each marked with red arrows pointing at fabricated violations. Unapproved porch extension. Unauthorized vegetation along shoreline. Encroachment into community access zone. Community access zone? That term had never appeared in any document tied to my land. My grandfather's deed clearly included full lakefront rights. That porch had been standing since before the HOA even existed. I unfolded a map enclosed with the citation. My eyebrows lifted. The plat showed a new boundary line, shifted 17 feet toward the cabin, slicing off nearly all my shoreline. Someone had redrawn history. And someone expected me not to notice. The diesel smell. The missing pin. The new plat. They were connected. My phone buzzed. A voicemail. From Marjorie Klein, the HOA president. Her voice played through the cracked cabin speaker with icy confidence. Elias, we've updated community boundaries. Your structure now violates setback requirements. Remove the non-compliant portion within 30 days or face escalating fines. No greeting. No explanation. Just a threat. I replayed it twice, letting the implications settle. My grandfather left me that cabin because he believed in boundaries, legal and moral. Hearing a stranger claim she could erase them like chalk from a sidewalk stirred something deep in me. I walked the perimeter, notebook in hand, documenting every detail: tire tracks, broken brush, disturbed soil, fresh sawdust near the shoreline. Whoever worked the land tried to make the cuts precise. But they didn't expect a land surveyor to be the owner. While tracking the tree line, I spotted something odd: a plastic flag marker, bright orange, hammered into the ground near a cluster of fern. It read, SBRA lot line. It didn't belong there. I knelt, lifting the marker from the soil. The dirt below was loose, too loose for old land. Someone had dug recently. A voice echoed from the trail behind me. Hey! You're not supposed to be down there. I turned. It was Paul, one of Marjorie's loyal board members. He wore a neon vest like he was directing highway traffic instead of trespassing on private land. "This is my property," I said. "Not according to the updated survey," he replied, chin high. "We're marking common shoreline access." "You're marking theft," I said, keeping my voice calm. Paul's posture tightened. "Look, man. Don't make this hard. Marjorie says this area belongs to the association." "And who signed off on that?" I asked. He hesitated. "The board. It's already filed." Filed. That word hit me like a cold wave. Someone had taken forged documents to the county and buried them under legitimate paperwork. I walked back to the cabin without another word. Inside, I spread out every document I owned: grandfather's original deed, surveys from the 1970s, tax maps, appraisal sheets. All of them agreed. The HOA map was a lie. Afternoon light cut through the windows. Dust floated in the beams, drifting like slow snow. My heart should have been racing, but instead I felt something else, a precise, cold clarity. I grabbed my field bag, pulled out my metal detector, and headed back outside. If the pins were moved, I'd find the originals. After 20 minutes of scanning, the device chirped near the base of an old birch. I swept again, narrowing the spot. Another chirp. I dug gently, fingers moving through cool soil. Then steel. A rusted pin, coated in decades of earth. Exactly where it belonged. My shoreline. My land. A crow called from a branch above, as if announcing something inevitable. Evidence didn't lie. People did. Back inside, I photographed everything: pin, coordinates, soil disturbance, fake markers. I printed the HOA map and highlighted the inconsistencies. Pages scattered across the dining table looked like a detective board from a crime show. As dusk settled over Rock Pine, the lake turned dark and glassy. A thin mist rose off the surface. It looked peaceful, almost sacred. In that quiet moment, it hit me: this wasn't a mistake. This was a calculated land grab. And they believed I would never notice. My phone lit again. Another voicemail from Marjorie. "Elias, failure to comply will result in daily fines effective immediately." I saved the message. Evidence. Then I opened a new folder on my laptop and labeled it, HOA Investigation, Do Not Delete. I stood there, listening to the cabin settle, the old wood creaking softly in the evening chill. The house felt like it was waiting for me to make a choice. Either I accepted their fabricated reality or I fought for the truth. The decision was easy. The harassment began the morning after I found the old survey pin. At 6:12 a.m., a sharp knock rattled my cabin door. I checked the peephole. 2 HOA board members, Paul and a woman I didn't recognize, stood on the porch like debt collectors. I opened the door just enough to speak. "What's the emergency?" The woman raised a clipboard. "We're conducting an early compliance inspection." "At dawn?" She shrugged. "Board policy allows unscheduled checks when properties pose a community risk." I stepped onto the porch, arms folded. "What risk?" Paul pointed toward the shoreline. "Unauthorized vegetation." I almost laughed. "That vegetation is a cedar that's been here longer than you've been alive." "We'll note your non-cooperation," the woman said, scribbling quickly. "Make sure you spell my name correctly," I replied. Their eyes narrowed before they walked off, muttering. I watched them disappear into the tree line, 2 shadows slipping between trunks. By noon, 3 new citations hit my inbox. Timestamp 12:03 p.m. SUBJ, immediate action required. Violations included: porch overextension, improper roof pitch, unregistered woodpile. I clicked through the photos attached. They weren't even taken on my property. Wrong cabin. Wrong angle. Wrong everything. I saved them anyway. Evidence doesn't need to look pretty. It just needs to exist. At 2:47 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Another voicemail from Marjorie. Her voice carried that clipped tone she used when she wanted someone to feel small. Elias, we've received reports of aggressive behavior. The board is concerned. We expect cooperation. Aggressive behavior? All I did was open a door. I forwarded the voicemail to a folder marked threats. That evening, I sat on the porch steps, reviewing county tax maps when a faint buzzing sound rose above the water. A small drone floated over the lake, red lights blinking. It hovered behind my cabin, tilting gently as it scanned the property. I stood slowly, keeping my movements calm. The drone shifted focus, aiming its camera at me. I grabbed my phone and recorded it. Illegal surveillance, I whispered on film. 6:59 p.m. HOA drone over private land. The drone zipped away when I held the phone higher. Shadows swallowed it as it retreated toward the upper ridge where Marjorie's house overlooked the community like a watchtower. The next morning, pressure escalated. At 8:15 a.m., while drinking coffee, I opened the HOA's latest email bulletin. Headline: Security concerns regarding certain members. Below it, a photo of my cabin, blurred, but unmistakably mine. Caption: Unpermitted modifications pose risk to shoreline integrity. No names, but everyone would know who they meant. That's how smear campaigns work. You don't accuse directly, you imply, then let fear do the rest. I stared at the screen until my coffee cooled. My grandfather always said corruption avoids daylight. It hides behind memos and gossip. Fine. I'd shine a light. I spent the afternoon digging through old county archives online. Permits, plats, minutes from decades-old development meetings. Half the documents contradicted the HOA's new maps. At 3:11 p.m., I found something important. A scanned deed from 1957, my grandfather's signature clear, his land extending to the lake with no encumbrances. No mention of shared access. No easement. No clause granting authority to any future association. That document alone made the HOA's updated boundaries impossible. When the sun dropped behind the ridge, I walked the shoreline again. The air carried that cool, metallic scent lakes get at dusk. My boots sank slightly in wet soil as I traced the line where the HOA claimed common access. The ground showed fresh rake marks, patterns too straight to be natural. Someone had groomed the area recently. As I followed the trail, I spotted a set of boot prints pressed deeply into the mud. Bigger than mine. Heavy tread. The depth showed urgency, like the person wasn't strolling, they were rushing. I photographed every print, every rake mark, every disturbed root. That evidence beat kept me focused. Back inside, I spread the photos out on the table next to the old deed. The contrast was almost poetic, a 70-year-old signature beside a freshly disturbed shoreline. At 9:42 p.m., my phone rang. I recognized the number immediately, Nathan Hale, my old college roommate, now one of the state attorney general's deputy investigators. He greeted me with his usual dry humor. Still alive, Eli? Barely, I said. I think my HOA's in the forgery business. That bad? He asked. Worse. Talk to me. I explained everything, missing pins, new plat lines, early morning visits, the drone, the citations, the false bulletin. His breathing slowed the way it always did when he listened carefully. Nathan never interrupted. He let the story build until the shape of it appeared. When I finished, he asked, "You're sure about the map discrepancy?" Positive. I found the original deed today. The new map contradicts it entirely. Send everything you've got. I will, I said. But I think this goes beyond boundary disputes. They're organized, and they're hiding something bigger. Nathan sighed. I've heard things about silver birch. Complaints. Odd filings. Residents feeling targeted. Then you know the pattern. Unfortunately. A pause. Then he added, Elias, listen to me. Don't confront them directly. Document only. Stay calm. I am calm. I know. That's why I'm saying it. We hung up on an unspoken agreement. He would investigate quietly. I would gather more. Before bed, I set my trail cameras outside, motion-triggered, infrared, silent. If someone tried entering the property again, I'd have proof. The night was still, the cabin settling slowly as temperatures cooled. Wind brushed through the pines, carrying the scent of sap and cold water. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling beams my grandfather had cut by hand. He trusted the law. He believed land meant something when your name was written on it. I wasn't about to let a forged document erase him. At 5:48 a.m., the trail camera sent a notification. Movement detected behind the cabin. I threw on a jacket and stepped onto the porch. The air bit at my skin, the sky still pale. I walked around the cabin carefully. Near the back window, fresh prints dotted the earth, smaller than the previous ones, but deliberate. Someone had approached the cabin in the dead of night. Another scan of the camera footage showed a figure wearing a hooded jacket, flashlight in hand, pacing near the porch steps. They never entered. They only inspected. Whatever they were looking for, they didn't find it. Inside, I opened my laptop and transferred the footage. Nathan needed to see it. While labeling the files, I noticed something troubling. The HOA had sent another email at 4:17 a.m. Subject: Final warning before enforcement action. Attached: a fabricated survey update with my cabin outlined in red, marked violation zone. Pressure wasn't rising, it was accelerating. I woke before sunrise, mind already racing through the evidence I'd collected. The cabin felt colder than usual, the kind of chill that seeps into your thoughts before it hits your skin. Something had shifted overnight, pressure transforming into purpose. The HOA wanted control. I wanted truth. Only one of us could afford to be patient. After making coffee, I spread every map, deed, photograph, and citation across the table. The clutter looked chaotic at first glance, but patterns jumped out once I stepped back. Every violation, every survey adjustment, every threat, each one lined up perfectly with the expansion project Marjorie mentioned at last year's community meeting. Community boat access, she had called it. I remembered her exact words. Our shoreline needs modernization. Certain properties will adapt. Certain properties. She meant mine. At 7:02 a.m., I opened the county's online deed archive. I had scanned my grandfather's original documents, but I wanted to see what the HOA had filed publicly. When I searched my parcel number, 2 deeds appeared. One from 1957, authentic. The other from 2022, a so-called boundary correction. I clicked it. What loaded felt like a punch to the ribs. The updated deed included a signature from a man named Douglas Parr, listed as a member of the Architectural Compliance Committee. The problem? Douglas died in 2018. I attended his memorial. He taught me how to restore cedar shingles when I was 12. Forged. Undeniably forged. I whispered to myself, this is it. I downloaded the file twice, then saved screenshots in 2 separate locations. When you're dealing with corruption, redundancy isn't caution, it's survival. At 7:23 a.m., Nathan called. You awake? He asked. I've been awake for years, I said. But yes. Send me everything from the deed archive. Don't compress the files. I won't. I paused, then added, they forged a dead man's signature. Nathan exhaled sharply. That's felony territory. I figured. He continued, we ran preliminary checks last night. Your HOA has filed 7 boundary amendments in the last 3 years. All of them affect older parcels. All of them shrink private shoreline. How many challenged it? Only one, he said. The homeowner lost. The judge claimed they lacked historical evidence. They didn't have my deed. Exactly why this matters. We spent 10 minutes outlining the next steps. He wanted affidavits, time-stamped logs, high-resolution scans, and a sworn statement. He'd arrange a quiet preliminary review inside his office. The words preliminary review sounded mild, but I knew what they really meant, the first step toward an investigation. After the call, the strategy phase began. I opened my grandfather's old metal file box, the one that smelled of cedar and engine oil. Inside were rolled survey maps he kept as backups. I unrolled one on the counter, flattening the yellowed paper with 2 coffee mugs. The coordinates matched the original deed perfectly. Then I compared it to the HOA's new document. The differences weren't minor. The entire southern boundary had been pulled inward with surgical precision. A forged map is one thing. A forged map supported by a false deed is something else entirely. At 10:14 a.m., I heard footsteps on the gravel outside. The cadence was brisk but heavy enough to signal authority, or someone playing the role. I stepped onto the porch with my phone recording. Marjorie stood near the path in a red blazer, clipboard in hand. Even from a distance, her posture radiated ownership. "Morning, Elias," she called. "Not really," I replied. She walked closer, heels sinking slightly into the damp earth. "We've received reports that you're disrupting survey markers." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean finding the ones your board buried?" "That's a serious accusation." "It's a serious crime," I said, keeping my tone level. She smiled, tight, practiced, empty. "Let's not escalate this. We can resolve things amicably if you accept the community amendments." "Amicably?" I echoed. "After trespassing, drone surveillance, fake violations, and forged documents." Her expression froze for a split second, the kind of freeze that reveals guilt more than any confession. "I don't know what you think you've discovered," she said, voice now brittle. "But our legal team stands by every filing." "Does your legal team know one of your signatories has been dead for 6 years?" I asked. Her pupils tightened. Her grip on the clipboard turned rigid. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she pivoted toward the shoreline, pretending to evaluate the water's edge. "You're making a mistake, Elias," she said quietly. "No," I told her, "I'm correcting one." She left without another word, moving with fast, clipped steps. I recorded her entire visit, then saved the clip to my evidence folder. Every interaction with her felt like uncovering another thread in a much bigger tapestry. Around 1:30 p.m., I walked the property again. The sky held a pale haze, letting through soft filtered sunlight. Birds moved cautiously along branches, unsettled by something I couldn't see. The quiet didn't feel peaceful. It felt staged. Halfway to the shoreline, I spotted a set of papers wedged between 2 rocks, wrapped in a plastic sleeve. I knelt and pulled them out carefully. The sleeve held printed emails. At first, I thought someone planted them to mislead me. But the sender names told a different story. From Marjorie.Klein@silverbergreserve.org to board@silverbergreserve.org. Subject: Boundary Adjustments. The email inside was blunt. "We need the shoreline consolidated before Phase 2 begins. The grant parcel is a priority. Move the pin if necessary. File the update before the end of quarter. Move the pin. Move the pin." There it was in her own words. The final line made my hands go cold. "If he challenges the update, we'll litigate until he sells." They weren't just stealing land. They were trying to exhaust me financially until I surrendered. I sealed the sleeve again, checking for fingerprints, then rushed inside to photograph each page. After backing up the evidence, I sat with my hands folded, letting the weight settle. Everything aligned now. The forged deed. The buried pin. The citations. The midnight surveillance. The smear bulletin. The emails. This wasn't incompetence. This was strategy. At 3:02 p.m., I called Nathan. "I found something," I said. He listened as I described the emails. I could hear him typing rapidly. "We need chain of custody," he said. "Photograph where you found them. Wear gloves if you handle them again." If they're authentic, this ties intent directly to her. What about the lawsuit? I asked. We're almost there. I'll speak with the AG directly. But first, we need your sworn declaration and every document indexed. I'll have the declaration tonight. Good. Elias, you're not just dealing with a rogue board. This is organized misconduct. I know. And if these emails are real, he said, they're cornered. I ended the call and returned to the table. I drafted the declaration slowly, verifying each timestamp, each detail. Every line mattered. By evening, clouds rolled across the ridge, masking the lake in shadow. The wind pushed ripples across the water, tapping leaves against the cabin windows. The atmosphere felt tense, but not threatening, more like the moment before a courtroom door opens. At 7:49 p.m., I sent Nathan the full package: deed scans, map comparisons. Courtrooms have a particular sound when anticipation settles over the room. It isn't silence. It's a tight, controlled stillness, papers shifting, shoes scraping, someone clearing their throat because they're afraid to speak above a whisper. That's what filled the county courthouse the morning my case went before Judge Rowe. I sat at the plaintiff's table while Nathan organized binders with the precision of a surgeon prepping instruments. He handed me one. "Stay steady," he said. "Facts win this." Across the aisle, Marjorie whispered to her attorney, a man wearing a charcoal suit and an expression that suggested he hadn't read half the documents he brought. 3 HOA board members sat behind her, arms folded, trying to project unity. None of them looked confident. Judge Rowe entered at 9:01 a.m. sharp. Everyone stood. When we sat again, the air felt heavier. Case number 24-317, Grant vs. Silver Birch Reserve Homeowners Association, the clerk announced. My pulse stayed calm, almost unnervingly so. I had lived with their harassment for months. Today, the roles reversed. Nathan began. "Your Honor, this case involves forged documents, unauthorized boundary alterations, and targeted harassment designed to strip my client of land his family has owned for nearly 7 decades. He clicked the first slide on the projector. My grandfather's deed appeared on the screen, clean, crisp, dated 1957. Exhibit A, Nathan said. Original, recorded, uncontested for 66 years. The judge nodded. Admitted. The defense attorney rose. Your Honor, the HOA asserts a boundary correction was necessary due to historical inaccuracies. Nathan didn't wait. We'll address that. But first, let's examine the deed they claim corrected those inaccuracies. He switched the slide. A second deed appeared, newer, neatly formatted, but unmistakably altered. A low murmur spread across the courtroom. Exhibit B, Nathan said. The alleged correction. Judge Rowe leaned closer. Counsel, the signature on this looks unusual. It should, Nathan replied. The man who signed it died 4 years before this document was filed. A rustle passed through the audience benches. Marjorie stiffened. Her attorney cleared his throat. That's a bold accusation, Your Honor. It's not an accusation, Nathan said. It's a death certificate. Exhibit C. He handed the judge a certified copy. The defense attorney faltered, eyes darting toward Marjorie as if she might produce a miracle. She didn't. Judge Rowe looked up. This is troubling. Nathan clicked again. A second slide showed the buried survey pin, the rusted steel coated with old soil. Exhibit D, he said. Original boundary marker. Then the next slide. A bright orange HOA marker pounded 17 feet westward. And Exhibit E, the replacement marker placed by the association's contractor. The judge tapped his pen. Do you have proof they installed it? Nathan smiled faintly. Exhibit F. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as the projector displayed footage from my trail camera. A man wearing a neon vest, Paul, moved through brush, dragging tools. He hammered the orange marker into the ground, looked around, then walked off. No defense attorney wants to be seen rubbing his temples in front of a judge, but this one did. Nathan continued, "Your Honor, let's move to the emails." He displayed the email packet I'd found near the rocks. The subject line, "Boundary adjustments." The incriminating line, "Move the pin if necessary." Judge Rowe's jaw tightened. "Mrs. Klein, do you deny sending these?" Marjorie stood slowly. "Your Honor, the emails lack authentication. Anyone could have planted them." Nathan stepped forward. "We anticipated that argument. Forensic analysis confirms the metadata. These emails originated from her account. Exhibit G." He passed the printed forensic report to the clerk. Marjorie's attorney tried again. "Even if authentic, they don't prove malicious intent." Nathan clicked to the next slide. Another email. "If he challenges the update, we'll litigate until he sells." The judge looked over his glasses. "Litigate until he sells? That's your version of community governance?" Marjorie shifted with visible discomfort. The language was informal. "Your Honor," Nathan said calmly, "their intent was explicit. They attempted to remove Mr. Grant's land through falsified documents and intimidation." Then Nathan handed me a folder. "Elias, tell the court what you observed." I rose. "Your Honor, over 3 months I documented every interaction. Early morning inspections. Drone surveillance. False citations. Fabricated violations. Attempts to enter my cabin without notice." I placed the binder on the witness stand. "These are timestamps, audio recordings, and photographs collected exactly as they occurred." Nathan approached and pressed play on a short audio clip. Marjorie's voice echoed through the courtroom. "Remove the structure or face daily fines." No greeting. No explanation. The judge leaned back. "Mrs. Klein, do you normally address residents this way?" She didn't answer. Her attorney stepped in. "Your Honor, context." "No," Judge Rowe said. "We've heard enough context." Nathan called the survey expert next. A thin man with silver hair stepped forward, swore in, and opened his folder. "Based on my analysis," he said, "the HOA survey is invalid. Coordinates have been shifted manually. No historical data supports the changes. The original pins verify the Grant property extends to the lake." "How certain are you?" the judge asked. 100%. The number floated over the room like a verdict in itself. Then came the final blow. Nathan introduced a financial auditor who had reviewed HOA records for donations tied to the proposed dock expansion. The auditor produced invoices with missing line items, unreported contributions, and payments routed through unnamed contractors. Judge Rowe stared at Marjorie. "Is there any explanation?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. Silence, pure, telling silence. Nathan stepped forward for his closing statement. "Your Honor, land is more than dirt. It's history. It's identity. It's legacy. This association tried to erase 66 years of lawful ownership with fraudulent documents and intimidation. When people lie." He held up the stack of evidence. "Keep your receipts." The line echoed through the room like a gavel. The judge cleared his throat and delivered the ruling. Effective immediately, the Grant property line is restored in full. All boundary amendments are void. All citations issued within the last 12 months are dismissed. Silver Birch Reserve is fined for unauthorized filings and harassment. He turned to the defense table. "Furthermore, I'm recommending criminal investigation into the forged deed and financial irregularities. Mrs. Klein, you and your board will relinquish authority pending review." Gasps spread through the courtroom. One board member covered his face. Another whispered, "We're done." Marjorie lowered her head, hands trembling. She looked smaller than she ever had standing at my shoreline issuing threats. The gavel struck once. Court adjourned. Nathan exhaled slowly. "It's over." "Not over," I said. "But finally moving in the right direction." We gathered the evidence, packed the binders, and stepped out into bright afternoons. The lake looked different after the verdict: same water, same slow-moving ripples, same scent of wet cedar drifting across the shoreline, but the tension that had clung to this place for months had finally loosened. For the first time in a long while, I could breathe without feeling watched. The shoreline was mine again. Not because I fought harder, but because the truth refused to bend anymore. I returned to the cabin 2 days after the ruling. The morning was cool, thin mist clinging to the treetops. Gravel crunched under the tires as I parked. When I stepped out, the air held a quiet steadiness, as if the property itself knew the storm had passed. I walked toward the water. The old birch pin, cleaned and reset by the county surveyor, stood exactly where it belonged. I ran my fingers over the steel head, feeling its weight, its certainty. That small piece of metal had carried generations of meaning, and it was still standing because the truth had been stronger than the lies built around it. Inside the cabin, afternoon light spilled across the wooden floors. Dust drifted lazily in the beams. The place felt lived in again, not invaded. I opened the windows, letting crisp air sweep through every room. The heater clicked on with familiar rhythm. The refrigerator hummed. The cabin felt alive in a way it hadn't since the first citation arrived. Around noon, I started repairing the porch steps. Not because the HOA demanded it, they no longer had the authority, but because it felt good to fix something with my own hands. My grandfather taught me to swing a hammer before I learned multiplication. He always said building things reminds you of who you are. While tightening a board, I heard footsteps on the gravel path. I looked up to see 2 neighbors, Tom and his wife, Clara, approaching slowly, hands tucked in their pockets like they were unsure how to start. Tom nodded. "Mind if we talk?" "Of course," I said, stepping down from the porch. Clara spoke first. "We wanted to apologize. We should have stood up sooner." "You didn't owe me anything," I said. "We did," Tom replied. "We let the board push people around for years. Everyone whispered, but nobody acted. You were the first to say no." I appreciated the honesty. Fear keeps people quiet, and Marjorie ruled through fear better than any small-town official I'd ever seen. But that rule had cracked, and people were finally willing to say so aloud. Clara added, "If you ever want help with repairs, we're right up the trail." I smiled. "Thank you. That means more than you know." After they left, the cabin felt warmer. Not physically, emotionally. For months, the community had felt like a battlefield. Now it was shifting back into something closer to what my grandfather described when he first built this place: neighbors who looked out for each other, not over their shoulders. Later that afternoon, I drove to the county office to finalize the restored deed filings. Nathan met me outside, leaning against his sedan, 2 folders tucked under his arm. He gave a tired grin. "You ready to close the loop?" he asked. "More than ready." Inside, the clerk processed our paperwork with careful attention, stamping each page. When the final document received its seal, Nathan gave a quiet nod. "That's it," he said. "It's formally recorded. They can't touch your land again." I exhaled slowly, letting the weight settle into something calmer. "Feels strange," I admitted. "How so?" "I've been collecting evidence for so long, I don't know how to relax." Nathan chuckled softly. "You'll remember. People forget fear faster than they think." We stepped outside, sunlight reflecting off the windshield of his car. "What happens to the board now?" I asked. "They'll face charges," he said. "Forgery, fraudulent filings, financial misconduct. It'll take time, but the system is moving. Your case opened the door." "Good." He clapped my shoulder. "You did more than protect your land, Eli. You exposed a structure that was hurting a lot of people." I didn't respond immediately. The words carried more weight than he realized. After he left, I returned to the lake and walked along the restored boundary. The water lapped gently against the stones. Leaves floated on the surface, spinning slowly in the evening breeze. The sky turned gold, then orange, then a soft violet as dusk settled. I paused near the cedar stump where the missing pin used to be. The forest was quiet, just the rhythmic sway of branches and the distant call of a loon. This was what my grandfather fought to preserve, a place where peace wasn't a luxury, but a birthright. Inside the cabin, I lit the fireplace for the first time since autumn. The crackling wood filled the room with warmth. I sat on the couch, resting my hands on the old armrests, letting the fire soften the edges of the past months. A soft knock sounded at the door. When I opened it, Sheriff Daniels stood on the porch, hat in hand. "Evening, Elias," he said. "Evening, Sheriff. I just came from the HOA office. County seized their records pending investigation." He paused, expression solemn. "You did the right thing. Took guts." I nodded. It was never about pride. It was about the truth. He adjusted his hat. "If everyone handled things with your patience, this county would be quieter." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe the quiet lets problems grow." He offered a faint smile. "Either way, it's done. Rest now." After he left, I stood on the porch watching the stars surface one by one. The air was cool, the sky clear, the lake reflecting every speck of light. I could almost hear my grandfather's voice, soft, steady, proud. By midnight, the fire settled into glowing embers. I closed the cabin door, feeling the weight of closure. Not victory. Not triumph. Closure. The difference matters. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the pines, casting long shadows across the restored boundary. The cabin stood firm, the land secure, the fear gone. People think justice comes with a roar, but the truth is quieter. It comes in steady breaths, in restored documents, in repaired steps, in neighbors who finally feel safe enough to speak. I walked to the shoreline one last time, let the cold water brush my fingers, and whispered a silent promise to the man who built this place. I kept it safe. Then I turned toward the cabin, ready for the next chapter of life, one built on truth, not fear. And as I locked the door that evening, I spoke the same words I'll share with anyone who faces a system like the one I fought. Have you ever faced a corrupt HOA or broken system? Tell me your story, and remember, keep your receipts. The morning after the county seized the HOA's records, I expected quiet. I expected the lake to return to the familiar rhythm it always held, slow ripples brushing the stones, birds lifting off the water, wind moving through the pines in gentle waves. But the silence felt different. Not peaceful. Not tense. Something in between, like the land itself was waiting for the next chapter to unfold. I brewed coffee and stepped onto the porch. Mist hovered above the lake in thin veils. The air tasted metallic, like rain was hiding somewhere behind the ridge. I took a sip and heard footsteps on the gravel path. At first, I assumed it was Tom again, but the stride was heavier, more deliberate. A man approached, tall, mid-50s, wearing a dark jacket and carrying a small folder. He stopped just short of the steps. "Elias Grant?" he asked. "That's me," I said, setting the mug down. He opened the folder. "My name is Director Henry Wells, State Department of Consumer and Community Affairs." I stiffened. "What brings you up here this early?" "A developing situation," he replied. "Mind if we talk inside?" I led him into the cabin. He scanned the room with the trained eyes of someone accustomed to reading environments quickly. When he finally sat at the dining table, he placed the folder between us. "This case didn't end at the county," he said. I didn't respond immediately. "Meaning?" He flipped open the folder. Inside were printouts, financial reports, meeting minutes, voting records, and a spreadsheet packed with numbers and red flag markers. "We found patterns in the HOA's filings that extend beyond your property," he said. "Boundary shifts, fraudulent amendments, missing funds, and misuse of lien authority." "How many properties?" I asked. He tapped a page. 21. "Including yours." My jaw tightened. 21 families? Some sold. Some didn't fight. Some were pressured out. We have reason to believe at least 2 residents lost their homes due to falsified liens. A sharp, cold anger rose in me, not the explosive kind, but the quiet, controlled type that grows roots. This wasn't just my battle. It was systemic. Marjorie didn't work alone, he said. Her board wasn't just complacent, they were participating. I leaned back, steadying myself. So what happens now? We're preparing a statewide audit. But we'll need your testimony again. Anytime, I said. He closed the folder. Your documentation was the spark. Without it, this might have gone unnoticed for years. The weight of those words settled on my shoulders, not heavy, but purposeful. When he left, the cabin felt different again. Larger somehow, as if the truth had expanded the walls. By late morning, neighbors began arriving in small waves. The news traveled faster than I expected. First came Tom and Clara, then a quiet couple from the Eastern Ridge, then Mr. Hawthorne, who lived near the trailhead. They gathered on the porch, voices low but firm. What's going to happen to the board? Someone asked. It's in the state's hands now, I replied. Mr. Hawthorne spoke next. We found out our dues were increased illegally last year. The board claimed storm repair costs. Those repairs never happened. A murmur spread among the group. Clara folded her arms. We trusted them. They used that trust as a weapon. One of the newer residents, a young father named Lucas, looked at me and asked, "How did you stay calm through all this?" I didn't, I said. I stayed focused. That's different. He nodded slowly, absorbing the distinction. The group stayed for nearly an hour, sharing stories they had never spoken aloud. Harassment letters. Threats. Fines for non-existent issues. Pressure to sell. Each account filled the air with a painful clarity. The board hadn't governed the community, they had manipulated it. When the crowd dispersed, I returned to the porch steps and sat with my elbows resting on my knees. The lake glimmered in patches of sunlight breaking through the clouds. The calmness that had once felt fragile now felt earned. Around 3:14 p.m., my phone buzzed. A message from Nathan. Need you in town tomorrow at 10. AG is expanding review. Important. I replied simply, I'll be there. Later that afternoon, I grabbed my tools and started clearing old brush along the path. Not because it needed doing immediately, but because physical work steadies the mind. The scent of sap filled the air with each cut, grounding me. As I worked, a familiar voice called out from behind me. You swing that axe the same way you did in college. I turned. Nathan stood near the birch stump, hands in his pockets, smiling faintly. You drove 4 hours to critique my technique? I asked. No, he said, stepping closer. I drove 4 hours to tell you something in person. He leaned against the stump. The Attorney General wants to use your case as the foundation for a statewide crackdown on HOA fraud. I paused mid-swing. My case? Your evidence, he said. Your maps. Your timestamps. Your recordings. You didn't just document harassment, you documented a structure built on deception. I let that sink in. So what exactly does the AG want? Your cooperation, he said. Your testimony. And your permission to use your case as the lead example. I nodded slowly. They have it. Nathan pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose. Good. The state needs this. People need this. We walked toward the cabin together, the ground soft beneath our steps. Before he left, he paused at the porch. You're the kind of person who doesn't realize the size of his impact until it hits him in the face. I smirked. That's supposed to be a compliment? Yeah, he said. Don't let it go to your head. He drove off, leaving the crunch of gravel echoing behind him. As night fell, I sat by the fireplace again, the flames steady and warm. Outside, the wind pressed softly against the windows. The world felt calm but alert, like the moment between breaths. For the first time since the ordeal began, I allowed myself to feel something I had kept buried: gratitude. Not for the conflict, but for the clarity it forced. For the community finding its voice. For the truth refusing to drown. The cabin glowed with orange light, shadows moving gently across the walls. I leaned back, letting the heat wash over me. The fight wasn't completely over. Cases like this never end in a single ruling, but the hard part had passed. The land was safe. The truth was secure. The system was finally looking inward. I closed my eyes and whispered what I had told the court, what I had told neighbors, and what I now tell anyone who faces a system built on silence. Keep your receipts. Because sometimes, one receipt can change everything.